Thank you for having us here today. It's the first time I've followed a musical act. It's usually, welcome to Washington, D.C. It's usually pretty quiet in July. I think the only thing I took a break this month was the cicadas, so it's been an unusually eventful July. Well, it's delightful to be here with both of you. I thought what I would do is just ask a few questions to sort of break the ice and then get into the meat of what we wanted to come here to discuss today. Deepak, you're, as you were introduced, a world-renowned pioneer in integrative medicine, personal transformation. You've often been found advocating for holistic medicine, a holistic approach to healthcare that emphasizes the importance of consciousness. And we talked about this backstage in meditation, all the things I want to be doing more of. What initially inspired you to explore this intersection of mind and body in your approach to health and wellness?
Well, as I recall, there was a pivotal moment in my residency. I had just intubated a patient, put in a pacemaker, and then I stepped outside the hospital to smoke a cigarette. And suddenly I felt disgusted, shameful, and I threw my cigarette. Those days in the VA hospital in Boston VA, doctors actually wore stethoscopes, white coats, and advertised in medical journals that Lucky Strike was better than Marlboro or something like that. So we've come a long way, but that was a very pivotal moment. And then I realized, of course, I took training in neuroendocrinology, studying the hormones of emotion. Now everybody knows about them: serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, opiates. And I realized there was a connection between consciousness and biology. That these molecules were also immunomodulators. They modulated the activity of the immune system. So I got interested in epigenetics and genetics and neuroscience, and ultimately all the way to consciousness.
And you were earlier in that. You were really ahead of your time thinking about those things when you first got started.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote Quantum Healing in 1988, I was actually vilified. I thought I was going to be fired, so I left before I could be fired. But in Boston, moved to California, same thing happened there. It took a little while for people to catch on.
Yeah. Dr. G, pleasure to have you here today. You and I have known each other a while. You're a nationally recognized leader in applying information technology to the delivery of care. You've held prominent positions in major organizations. You're a change maker in digital health. Can you share with us a key moment in your career that really got you started on this approach to integrating digital health in the delivery of care?
Sure. First, Scott, thank you so much for having me. Casey, Mike, the Premier team, it's such an honor to be here. I have to tell you, just sitting next to Dr. Chopra will bring your blood pressure down. So I highly recommend it when you get a chance. I think the most pivotal moment in my sort of journey in health tech, very similar to yours, Deepak, is how I started, which was a big accident. Right? I was either in the wrong place at the wrong time or the right place at the right time, depending how you look at it. But the long and short of it is I became a rheumatologist because my mom actually has a very rare autoimmune disease. And she was misdiagnosed her entire life, actually, until I became a rheumatologist and actually diagnosed her correctly. But a big part of her journey was her data and her records being in disparate places, and all of her doctors, pulmonary, cardiology, neurology. She was seeing every specialty you can imagine, but they were all in different institutions. And her data was not following her, and certainly not following her in real time. And so there was a point in my late 20s when I was a fellow here at George Washington when she was dying. And I stopped everything, almost got thrown out of my program, stopped everything, got all of her records, which was itself a mission, and then put it all together. And I put it all together chronologically. And I said, okay, mom had these symptoms, ultrasound was done, then pulmonary did the CT, yada, yada, yada. Made the diagnosis, saved mom's life. Mom is now 76, lived to meet my daughter. It's doing great, thank you. Thank you. But the moment that I had was, I'm so blessed. I'm so lucky. I mean, how many people can have a rheumatologist figure out what their mom has? And I have to say, I mean, I want to say I'm smart. Mom didn't have anything so esoteric. It's just the puzzle was very difficult to piece together if you didn't have the data. And I was living at a time when electronic health records were just getting started. I was training. And I said, every one of my patients should be able to do this with or without me. They should have access to their data. Their doctor should be able to communicate virtually or otherwise. We should have insights and analytics to be able to help us make diagnoses at the bedside better, faster, and smarter. And so I've really dedicated my career in health tech to my mom, but to every patient out there who doesn't have a daughter who's a rheumatologist, right? It shouldn't take that. It just shouldn't be that difficult.
I was recently, I got asked by a friend to look at some lab results and sort of a complex compilation of symptoms and lab results, and so I put it into Claude. And you know, the presumptive diagnosis in this case was hemochromatosis, which is a genetic disorder that causes iron overload, and there were signs of that, but it just didn't smell right to me, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I put it into Claude, and Claude came back and said, this could be hemochromatosis, but it looks like a lab mistake. Repeat the lab tests. So I told my friend to do that, and it turned out to be right. It was astounding, and I also recently completed an exercise where at the American Enterprise Institute, we published this on CNBC, where we administered the USMLE Step 3 medical licensing exam to the top 5 LLMs, so Llama, Grok, Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT. ChatGPT scored a 98%. The others scored in the 80s. The passing grade, mind you, on the USMLE Step 3, as you know, is 60, and the average physician gets a 75%. So I just sort of preface my question to you, you know, you talk about pulling together a complex history and a complex series of tests and being able to discern diagnosis from looking very carefully and longitudinally, but how do you see AI starting to impact what you were able to do on a more routine basis?
Well, look, generative AI is the operative word. Claude, Bob, whatever names we come up with, right? Dr. G's a good one. I'm waiting for that one. But the truth is, we are in the business of humanity, right? And when we look to the future of what things like generative AI and many other technologies can do, we first need to reflect and look at the technologies we've implemented to date and what we've done wrong. And the biggest thing that we've done wrong is we've really hurt the workforce, right? Electronic health records have really set the tone for the way physicians feel about technology across the board. And for the most part, you all know this, they're turned off, right? Because the electronic health record solved 3 problems, but created 5 new ones. And is a large contributor to burnout, not the only one, but certainly a large piece. And so my biggest pause with generative AI is to say, look, we have to point these technologies, first after understanding them more in depth, because we are still learning, but we need to point these technologies at ways that complement the workforce. And when you talk to technologists, which I spend a lot of time doing, the first thing they say is, hey, Dr. G, we have this physician shortage, everyone's burnt out, we're just gonna replace them. We're gonna replace them with Claude. And I stop and I say, so that's the wrong problem to solve, right? The problem to solve is how do you get doctors happier at the bedside, complemented with technologies that make them better, faster, and smarter. And I'm going to give you an example since I get to pick on Dr. Chopra. This may not happen again, so I'm going to milk it, right? Why do patients come to the doctor? Patients come to the doctor because they trust their physicians. 92% of Americans still trust their physicians, even if they don't trust the institution of healthcare or science. But if someone said, Dr. Chopra is my doctor, how many people want to see Dr. Chopra? Casey, I know you do, right? She's a huge fan. You come to the doctor because you know Dr. Chopra, and you want to be seen by him, in spite of the system that might not be the best and the office manager that may not be very polite. And so we have to understand that consumers come to the doctor for the doctor. And if we were to replace Dr. Chopra with Dr. Claude Chopra, the consumer knows it's not Dr. Chopra. And that 92% trust drops, and the loyalty drops, right? Now, if we're able to give our doctors technologies that can help them better document, better do prior authorization, do the things in your world, Scott, right? Better diagnostics, better therapeutics, the things that you do at Pfizer and Illumina, right? If we can make the friction in healthcare, which is largely the back end, make our doctors happier, because we also know that burned out physicians lead to really bad consumer experiences. There's no good consumer experience if your workforce is pissed off, overworked, underpaid, and hasn't slept in a few days. Does that make sense? Do you guys see that every day? Oh, thank you. So I love Claude as an assist, right? I love generative AI as an assist, as my co-pilot. But I would rather see Dr. Chopra any day. And that's what we have to remember. We have to remember the humanity. To get the tech right, we keep the humanity in medicine. That's the key.
I was just thinking about how cool it'd be to see Dr. Chopra. Are you taking new patients? I want to shift the discussion. We talk about a rising instance of chronic illness, rising rates of chronic disease, and trying to shift the focus of the healthcare system from, episodic treatment of acute illnesses to trying to be more prevention-oriented. And I want to talk a little bit about health and wellness promotion and taking a more comprehensive, holistic approach to care. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you define holistic health and where you think it fits in, why you think it's important for us to be thinking about this?
Well, the word holistic, it actually is related to the word health. Health, holistic, wholeness, because we are not just a physical machine that has learned how to think. We are a body, we are a mind, we are emotions, and we are a spirit. And holistic medicine is the return of the memory of wholeness. We now know that less than 5% of disease-related mutations are fully penetrant, and that they guarantee the disease. Less than 5%. So less than 5% of disease is predicted based on gene mutations. 95+ disease is modulated by lifestyle. How you sleep, you manage stress, whether your parasympathetic nervous system is dominating or not, what kind of nutrition you have, what's the quality of your relationships and emotions, your biological rhythms. There are about 10 things, if you pay attention to, you're actually returning to homeostasis, which is basically what healing is. Healing is return to homeostasis. That's all it is. And it's fascinating that people have taken such a long time to recognize this. In the year 12 actually, we did a 1-week retreat on mindfulness, meditation. And in that 1 week, all the genes that are responsible for self-regulation, homeostasis, went up some 17-fold over baseline. All the genes associated with chronic diseases like autoimmune illnesses, even cancer, heart disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, went down. The enzyme telomerase, which is basically what measures our genetic clock, went up 40%. And we had Elizabeth Blackburn as one of our collaborators. She got the Nobel Prize for discovering telomerase. We couldn't get the study published for 3 years. Finally, it was accepted by Nature Translational Psychiatry, because somebody else was replicating it. So now we know that the way you live, the way you think, the way you eat, the way you feel, the way you behave, the way you relate to other people, makes all the difference. 95% of epigenetic modulation is what is needed.
What practical tips would you have for us in trying to incorporate this into our own lifestyles? You and I talked a little bit about this backstage. You got me started on it, so.
Okay, so practical tips. Are you enjoying this conversation? A little more enthusiasm, please. So let me ask you the same question. but do not answer it. Okay, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do not answer it till I raise my hand, okay? Are you enjoying this conversation? So my question is a mental event. Your answer is a mental event. In between is you, which is awareness or consciousness or presence. That's all. And this is the simplest state of awareness in which there's perfect homeostasis. So you don't need to do anything. Just as you're listening to me, just be aware of that which is listening. Try it right now. As you're listening to me, be aware of that which is listening. This simplest state in religious traditions is called the soul, the spirit. But we don't use that word in cognitive science. We say awareness or consciousness or presence. When you bring presence to an object, any object, it becomes beautiful. When you bring presence to a person, that's called love. So love, beauty, and presence go together, and they are a state of self-regulation. Practical tips, just be aware. Stop once in a while and ask yourself, am I aware? And observe yourself. In the midst of an observation, be aware of the observer. That's mindfulness. It's not complicated. Of course, you can feel your breath, you can feel sensations in your body, you can evoke an image, a feeling, a thought, and put presence. You know, these days everybody says, be present in the moment. Yes, that's true. But as soon as you use the word moment, there's already time. Okay? The present moment, there's time. Time disturbs homeostasis. Presence is not in time. It's called the eternal now. And it's the state of least excitation. Homeostasis, self-regulation, wholeness, healing, health, joy.
Are there any practical things that you do over your daily ritual that,
What would be more practical?
What's your daily routine like? Are there things that you build in discipline?
I'm a compulsive, obsessive neurotic. And I'm now 78 chronologically, although biologically I think I'm half that. But I have all the luxury now, so my routine, 2 hours of yoga every day. Don't work after 5. Don't start my day till 11. And I have the freedom to do that now. So, but I wouldn't recommend that for you. What I would recommend for you is good sleep. Really, you know, now.
How much?
8 hours of good sleep. It's lack of sleep is the #1 predictor of Alzheimer's, unless you have one of those fully penetrant genes. It also is the #1 predictor of premature death from heart disease or inflammation or anything that's related to inflammation. It's the most underestimated medicine in the world is sleep. So take time to sleep, exercise, move, and pay attention to your diet. That's it. You know, 95% of the genes in your body are not even human. You know, we are a few human cells hanging on to a bacterial colony. And your microbiome, you can't change your human genes, although you can upgrade them through these practices. You can upgrade the activity of genes. But you can change the genetic population of 90% of your genes. And if your genes are the software and your body is the printout, you should be able to print out a new body every 3 months. I'm serious. 90% of the genetic information in your body is in your gut and also in your skin. And we know that skin, gut, brain, same germ layer, neuroectoderm. And people used to underestimate the taking care of the skin. It's all supposed to be very kind of egotistical. But actually, if you take care of your skin, you're actually affecting neuropeptides in the brain. So take care of your skin. Make sure you're hydrated. If necessary, use oils. And every part of your body is connected to a particular part of the brain, sensory cortex as well as motor cortex, and the gut too. So, I would say if you want to do 4 things: sleep well, take a little time to meditate, move, and have a diet that is minimal in manufactured, refined, processed foods. Anything that comes in a can or has a label, minimize that. Maximum diversity of plant-based foods. If you eat meat, make sure it doesn't come from a factory. That's all you have to do. Meditate a little bit, 20 minutes, sleep well, take care of your diet, and move.
Thank you. Dr. G, we talked about a holistic approach to the patient. So we zoomed in. I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about, a holistic approach to the broader system. What do you see as the challenges that we face right now trying to achieve some of these goals in being able to take this more comprehensive, holistic approach to medicine?
Well, first of all, I think if we all sleep more, we might fix the healthcare system, clearly. Look, the key challenges and opportunities, I think a lot of us understand what they are right now in the industry. And number one, I've heard Mike say it, I've heard Casey say it, it's the workforce, right? Number one, we have to acknowledge we're living in a post-pandemic era where we've really burnt out the workforce. We have 1 in 5 healthcare workers leaving the industry since 2020 with no real signs of slowing down. Number two, we're living in a world where we talk a lot about consumer engagement, patient engagement, but we rarely connect it to physician engagement, right? We've somehow divorced those 2 concepts. And as we talked about, to get good patient outcomes, you need a happy, healthy workforce. They are very much connected. Third, we're in tough economic times. We're all being asked to do more with less, and if you happen to be in rural America, you're being asked to do much more with much less, right? The flip side is we are living in an era of abundant innovation, abundant technology, whether we're talking about the fact that hybrid health, telemedicine is now a reality, it's no longer a discussion or a maybe. Artificial intelligence certainly has the promise to change many things and many inefficiencies that we have in the system, and to help us predict, frankly, things we couldn't have even imagined in the past. But I think one of the other exciting opportunities we're still learning from, but we continue to see people wanting to disrupt healthcare, right? Whether they're from big tech, whether they're a retailer, whether they're just a startup of, I want to say 2 ladies in a garage, right? Because the healthcare consumer is the woman of the household still. There is abundant opportunity, even though the challenges keep coming. And you're the policy expert, so I won't get started on the regulatory challenges, but there's enormous opportunity. When I look at every challenge, there's enormous opportunity right next to it.
Deepak, what we talked about, sort of picking up at this intersection of personal well-being and the well-being of the healthcare system as well, and the rising amount of physician burnout that we've seen. I think the AMA recently did a survey where 50% of physicians reported feeling burnout, and many associated with a feeling of depression as well. What advice would you give a healthcare organization, both on the delivery side as well as those providing services to the delivery side, to support the mental health and well-being of their workforce? We've talked about, you gave us some tips for dealing with our own holistic health. How can an enterprise help deal with the holistic health of their workforce?
Well, I think everyone knows that healthcare professionals, healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, psychiatrists have high rate of depression, suicide, and burnout. And there are four or five things that cause that. One is a very chaotic environment in the hospital. Too many things going on at the same time. The second is physicians and healthcare providers feel a loss of autonomy. They're not in control of even how much time they spend on their patients. You said, why do people come to see a doctor? They trust him, but they also have a story. Physicians don't have time to listen to a story. Now, digressing for a moment, when I was an intern, my wife was pregnant in a small hospital, Plainfield, New Jersey, before I went to Boston and joined the big hospitals. The chief of medicine called me. My wife was pregnant. He says, I'm afraid, I think your wife has thalassemia. You know, thalassemia is Mediterranean disease, which is fatal. I said, she couldn't possibly have thalassemia. She's healthy. So he said, come, look at the blood test under the microscope. And sure enough, the cells look thalassemic. I went to New York Library, spent 3 days over a weekend, discovered that there was a belt of thalassemia minor along the exact route that the armies of Alexander the Great took from Macedonia all the way to India. And this took me 2 days. Now, talking about AI, that takes 5 seconds. That takes 5 seconds. But the point I'm saying is people come to the doctor with a story. Nobody has time to listen to their story. Doctors are frustrated. They have no sense of autonomy. They are beholden to, unfortunately, administrative and financial stakeholders. So they have under time pressure. And there's a lot of emotional drainage that happens. You're seeing death every moment in the emergency room. You're seeing a lot of suffering. You also have to deal with people who are distressed relatives. So no wonder there's burnout. You know, there's data now that shows that a surgeon who works 80 hours a week, 50% burnout. Surgeons who work less than 60 hours, still 30% burnout. And burnout happens when we can't deal with these situations that we are put into. So first of all, I think there needs to be social support. There has to be measures for stress management, but social support. People need to understand that healthcare providers are at risk. And there has to be less working hours. You know, we used to work 24/7, and that's decreasing a little bit. But time pressure is there, and all these factors are there. We need a revolution in how we take care of our patients, because we need to take care of ourselves too.
Yeah, your comment struck with me, because I remember when I was training in residency, I used to ask patients questions about their life. And I was admonished for it when I was training by some of the attendings who thought I shouldn't be asking them about where they work and how they live and things like that. But you learn so much about a patient that helps inform why they're sick, what prompted them to come in to the emergency room.
Columbia Medical School has started a department of narrative medicine. So it's one of the most popular electives that you can take for medical students now. You listen to stories, because somewhere in that story is a hint, a clue to what's going on. You know, whether it's a marital discord or a child is on drugs or somebody has died in the family that's affecting everything. And you know, it's not only, it's affecting your hormones, it's affecting your immune system. You know, to separate mind and body as two different entities is ridiculous. You know, this one continuum, wherever a thought or an emotion goes, a molecule follows, and vice versa.
I want to just, I guess the kids say double click now. Is that what they say? Is that brat? Is that the new thing?
So, yeah, what's the new new thing. We're going to get a lifeline from Sony.
So I want to double click on the idea of integrative medicine. First, what's meant by integrative medicine? It's a sort of holistic approach to healthcare that combines conventional medical treatments with complementary alternative therapies, emphasizing the treatment of the whole person. What we've been talking about here, mind, body, spirit, rather than just addressing symptoms. Did I get it right, sort of?
Yeah, but there's no question that for acute illness, you need modern, if you have pneumonia, no amount of meditation is going to help you. You need to take an antibiotic. You break your leg, you should see an orthopedic surgeon. You have appendicitis, you probably need surgery. So, don't discount one against the other. I think the better word would be integrative medicine. Good medicine is that which affects outcome. That's all. We shouldn't be saying holistic medicine, modern interventional medicine. For acute illness, you need modern medicine at all times. But for chronic illness, as I said, you need both.
Dr. G, we're living in and you wrote about this in your book, among other topics that you touched on, we're living in a sort of period of time when everyone's claiming to be an expert, many of them on social media, claiming to be experts in integrative and holistic medicine in particular. How do we navigate that information landscape? What advice would you give consumers who are looking for tips, advice, perspective in this kind of information environment?
Sure. So I think we have to first acknowledge the moment in history that we're in, right? Which is that we are in a post-pandemic world where everyone has gotten the reminder, both healthcare and non-healthcare consumers, that health is wealth, right? And they're hungry. Everyone out there is now hungry for health information, how to stay well, how to manage whatever illness they may already have. And they are willing to spend money on it. And they are willing to follow, in the absence of having a doctor or a doctor to follow, they're willing to follow anyone who promises to have this solution, right? And when you look out, even in our own audience, right, if you look at the wearable market, this is a great indicator of this. Every consumer today has healthcare at their proverbial wrist, their proverbial finger, and they're interested in measuring everything from their steps to their sleep to their mood. Even if they don't know what it means necessarily, but they feel empowered. They feel like, I'm on it. I'm managing my health with or without my doctor. And in healthcare, we've left this huge gap open, right? We continue to feel like, well, we're busy saving lives. We can't possibly be on TikTok, right? That's just so ordinary. And the reality is that 59 million Americans turn to social media influencers every day for decisions about their health. And here's the thing, they're not just listening to them, they're following them. They're inspired by them. They look like them, black, white, or the other, right? And when they say, if you want to prevent cancer, just take this supplement for $9.99, or just do this gene kit at home for $14.99. They're not getting a mammogram. They're skipping the colonoscopy. And these are your patients. You are operating in a fee-for-service to value-based care transition, and they're not even coming to you. And someone who has actually not traditionally been your competitor, right? You're no longer competing with the doctor down the street or even the healthcare institution down the street. You're now competing with influencers who have, for all intents and purposes, really victimized our patients, right? And by the time we get to them, it's often too late, and the outcomes are even worse. And somehow we've accepted that in healthcare. We've somehow accepted that mis and disinformation is just part of the air. It's just part of the environment, and it's somebody else's problem. It's not our problem. We're busy saving lives. We have to really flip that narrative and now meet the consumer where they're at, because they are on TikTok, and they are on Instagram. And if you are not there in a meaningful way, if you are not the truth tellers that are doing it in a simple, relatable, inspiring way, someone else is taking care of your patients, and it's not you. And by the time they get to you, you are cleaning up the mess. We've seen it time and time again. And it's not a COVID issue. I mean, we know this, right? Mis and disinformation has been around since the Black Plague. But because of technology, whether it's generative AI, whether it's WhatsApp or social media, it is getting worse. mis and disinformation is spreading 6 times faster than the facts. And so really the call to action in the book, Scott, is to say, we have to start paying attention to this and not accepting it as the status quo that we practice in, but instead start taking steps to really own it, particularly as you are in a value-based care environment, because no one is getting a mammogram if they don't know what it is, right? So it continues to be complicated, and I think it is really going to continue to get amplified.
It always seemed, from sitting in the FDA, we saw cell therapy clinics sprouting up, offering cures for ALS and diseases like that. And it always felt to me that this was most rampant. Let me take a step back. You don't see quack cures for broken arms and pneumonia, because we, as providers, we have good answers for broken arms and infections. Where we don't have good answers for clinical problems, that's where these things seem to seep in or gain resonance. And you talk about trying to provide an alternative set of facts for consumers, but physicians aren't doing that, and they don't have time to do it. Even in their individual relationship to their patient, they often don't have time to educate around it, certainly on an ongoing basis. Who can fill that information environment? Do you think large healthcare organizations, employers can be doing more to help educate their workforce and fill that information environment?
So I think we at the enterprise level have to do it. And I agree with you. I'm not suggesting that every doctor has to now have a second job as a marketer and a social media expert, right? And I spent a significant amount of time in the book, in chapter 8 in particular, talking about the Cleveland Clinic and how they really gave birth to their partnership with YouTube, all the video content and virtual visits you can now do. But it was really the chief marketing officer, wink, wink, Casey, looking at you, right? It was really the chief marketing officer that said, hey, we have a problem here. We have a brand loyalty problem. We have a trust problem. And we need to leverage our assets, and our biggest assets are our doctors. The chief marketing officer went over to the chief medical officer and said, hey, could you get some of your doctors to talk all that science stuff, but simply, right, in relatable, simple language, and also to comb their hair? Because I'm going to put them on camera, and then I'm going to, get it to 30 seconds, and then I'm going to put it out in the World Wide Web. But then I'm going to make sure they know that they can make an appointment, i.e., we're the Cleveland Clinic, we're accountable. Because none of those influencers are accountable, to your point. If you get better, you don't get better, your kidney gets blown out, good luck.
And they're not regulated either.
And they're not regulated. I knew you were going to bring that in there, Scott. And they're not regulated. And this is the most important piece when we think about generative AI, is the regulation. Look, I'm the biggest innovator. I'm the biggest believer in tech. But we have to find a balance between innovation and regulation. And social media is a terrific example, because we've largely left that to the social media companies to regulate. And now, we all understand this. The data's out there on how it's lobotomizing our children, mimicking addiction. We can't do that with healthcare. We can't do this in this next era of healthcare, because we need to get generative AI right. We have so many issues and problems. And so this has to be something that is a priority for every enterprise. And when I speak around the country and I talk about value-based care, consumer engagement, who's in charge of brand loyalty, patient acquisition, retention, it's a team sport. It's the chief marketing officer. It's the chief medical officer. It's the chief financial officer with the CIO who's investing in the right technologies. It has to be an enterprise-level strategy that leverages all those things, right? Just like we do every day in healthcare. And probably the last time we saw this was during COVID. I'll tell you, as the CMO of Salesforce that was in charge of 80,000 employees globally during the pandemic, it was the first time I met the chief marketing officer, because she knocked on my door and said, I got to get people in and out of the office. I got to figure out how to test them, what to do, what to say. And I said, great, because my phone is blowing up and I can't possibly answer all these questions at the same time. And I think every day in healthcare is a crisis, right? Every day is something equivalent to what we've been through, and we have to apply the same team sport mentality. But it is really no one function that is in charge of this, if you're doing it the right way and playing to everyone's strengths, because again, the docs have enough to do. It's not for them to do this as a hobby or a side sport, but to actually partner at the enterprise level to do this right if you're interested in consumer engagement and you're interested in value-based care, you got to have a mis and disinformation strategy as well.
Yeah, I'll just say as an aside that one of the challenges I think that the medical product companies have is in responding to misinformation, disinformation in the marketplace is that their speech is regulated, and when they're responding to disinformation, misinformation, they can easily fall outside of the FDA-approved labeling. So we actually had a discussion around this. We do a panel every year at UCSF with all the former commissioners, and this came up. Rob Califf was on the panel, Mark McCullough was there, I was there, Janet Woodcock, and we actually had a discussion around this. And one of the ideas that we generated, and I say it because FDA just implemented this, was to create a safe harbor for companies to be able to respond to misinformation, disinformation, have more latitude in that response. And so they would have a safe harbor for speech that's engaged in as a way to respond to clear disinformation in the marketplace. So I encourage medical product companies to think about that, being more aggressive, and I think FDA is open to giving companies more latitude to do that, because the challenge is that there's not a lot of people pushing back on this, and there's not a lot of people providing good information in response to bad information on these platforms. Deepak, I just want to turn to you to provide your thoughts on how you think about the digital technology, the impact on patients in the healthcare system, and how we can potentially better harness it as something to improve patient care.
So I think it's important to recognize that the evolution of technology is inevitable. Whenever a new technology comes, there's a lot of fear attached to it, but you can't go back. You can't go back on the internet, you can't go back on email, you can't go back on social media, you can't go back on Instagram or whatever, and you cannot go back on AI. Okay? I am a fan of technology. I think technology is neutral. How we use it depends on us. We don't have to be slaves of technology. I'm wearing all these biosensors right now. You see there are 4 of them, and they're all different. I also have a glucose monitor going on right now, looking at my metabolic profile. There is no experience, mental, emotional, perceptual, that is now not measurable. Any experience you have is measurable, okay, at many levels. And that's a great thing. Now, having said that, also large language models will hallucinate. They'll frequently give you wrong information, but that's a process in evolution. As I speak right now, people are developing small language models. So for example, now can I promote myself? So you can go online right now and check out digitaldeepak.ai. You don't need to even download an app. You can go on your browser, check out digitaldeepak.ai, ask me any question on mental well-being, on health, on longevity, on health span, on diabetes, metabolism, and you'll get the answer immediately in my voice. And in 2 weeks, we'll have that in Arabic, in Hindi, and Spanish as well. So I'm reaching millions of people just through digital technology. I've just written a book called Digital Dharma, where you can actually use AI as a personal confidant. You can use AI as a research assistant. You can use AI as a health coach, both for mental and physical well-being. And you can use AI as a spiritual guide. You just have to know how to use it, and the technology is getting better and better every day. So we can't go back. How are we going to use this technology to the best way possible? Also, AI is improving. So, you look at some new AI engines, search engines like Perplexity, for example, you get references. I want to look up autoimmune illness, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, whatever. I can personalize the information. I think with the technology, the future of well-being is going to be very personalized, very predictable, very participatory, process, preventive, but it's a great future. We cannot go back, as I said. We have to adopt these technologies. They keep improving. They keep improving, and now you can get references to everything that you want, and it saves a lot of time. It doesn't replace us physicians. In fact, it gives us more time to listen to people and to be more creative. Also, collective thinking. You know, we all have this system of grand rounds in hospitals. Okay, you can have grand rounds on AI with multiple specialties. Frequently, when I noticed in the past, you know, when I had a patient and the patient had a disease and only the specialists were taking care of the disease and the generalists were not involved. That's why we have grand rounds. You get everybody's opinion, collective thinking, collective breakthroughs. That was not possible before. So this is going to be a new age, and we better embrace it, and we better educate ourselves about it, and we should be informed. We shouldn't. Large language models, particularly in medical specialties, are going to now be replaced with mobile small language models. So you'll have AI just for metabolic disease, AI just for cancer, AI just for autoimmune illness. And there'll be a lot of collective thinking going on, shared vision, complementing each other's strengths, and a grand rounds that is unprecedented and that we didn't have in the past.
You know, one of the things, when I went through the exercise with feeding the USMLE Step 3 to the LLMs, one of the striking things with ChatGPT relative to the other models was not just that it answered everything correctly on the multiple choice test, but it explained why the other choices were suboptimal, and it even at times went beyond the answer and suggested other things. There was one patient on a question was a patient who presented with signs of a sexually transmitted disease, and it asked, it said that the physician swabbed the patient for certain diseases and started him on empiric antibiotics. What would be the next right thing to do? And the next right thing to do was to bring the patient back for serology testing, HIV serology testing, because the patient was at risk for HIV given the history of sexually transmitted diseases. But then ChatGPT said, but at that time you should also check the blood cultures, check the cultures to make sure the antibiotics covered it, and question the patient about compliance. So it went beyond what the answer was, giving further instruction. It just was an amazing amount of intuition. And I'm reminded that these models are models borrowed from the consumer tech world, trained on open source data. These are not models built to replicate human biology. We're working on those models now. Do you see, assuming you can solve for the regulation, do you envision a day when these aren't just going to be tools that assist physicians or help patients, sort of gather the right questions for a physician interaction, but actually will autonomously be handling certain medical encounters?
I don't think so. I think the whole, what I've learned is it's the art of the prompt. And that's what I'm dealing with in my new book. How do you ask the right questions? Because it's the prompt, and the prompt can be very personalized. I have a 35-year-old patient, my wife was a great example for me. She had thalassemia trait. She didn't have the disease, but a lot of people don't know the difference in this country because they haven't seen that much thalassemia. But I had, even as a medical student, so I knew what I was looking for. So when you know what you're looking for, the right prompts, personalized, will give you more information than you could find in days and days of work, or going to a library, or even talking to other physicians.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I'm totally ripping off the art of the prompt. I totally agree with that. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Look, I think the difference in what you talked about, right, is asking the questions to Claude and so on and so forth. You're assuming the data is pure and that you have all of the data, right? And I'm going to, again, not to be a spoiler, but I'm going to go back to the EHR because we have, as exciting as generative AI, as large language models are, we have to look at how we did it wrong in order to get it right this time. And one of the things that has happened with the EHR, and you know this and you know this, is the note. The note used to be 1 page, and if you were a surgeon, it was 2 sentences maybe, right? That was the so-called
2 illegible sentences.
Correct. But for the most part, it was all the things you needed to know. In rheumatology, right? Red, raised, I mean, it was very succinct, but it was exactly the important things. Now, for those that were around during the Encyclopedia Britannica, now you have an entire chapter of the Encyclopedia Britannica as the note, right? It's so much information. Most of it is incorrect. Halfway through the note, he turns into she, because somebody copied and pasted the last note and the last note. And so inevitably, when you go in as a doc now, you actually have to ask all these questions again, because you understand that someone put no tobacco use, and yet you're looking at a chest x-ray with someone with obvious COPD, right? And then you say, how many packs a day? And oh yeah, you quit 5 years ago. But someone put you never smoked, so now every doctor that sees that patient has that in the record, and that's gospel. Now, if we put Claude on that case, Claude's not gonna come up with COPD. Right? But I have this human piece, and I'm looking at this patient, I'm looking at this x-ray, and I already know it's COPD. Right? So we have to balance it with getting the data right. In other words, the challenges that we have with technology today, the challenges we have in the healthcare system, one of the biggest ones is interoperability. And we have not solved that with technology because we're not interested in solving it, frankly, right? We've regulated pieces of it, we've made it better, but we are not sharing data across the board. That is simply not something that we do. So just like my mother's case, if a patient comes in and you don't have half their case, generative AI is only going to be as smart as we allow it to be, and as much data as we allow it to have, and ensuring that it's correct. So we have to keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with people's lives, we are dealing with people's livers, kidneys, and when you have half the information, whether you're using generative AI or not, you're not getting a good diagnosis, and you're definitely not getting a good outcome, and the consumer is not having a great experience. So we have to level set some of these limitless potentials with the reality of all the dysfunction we have in healthcare. We still have to fix it. Interoperability still has to be fixed. Claude is not doing that for us, Scott. It simply can't.
I have one thing to share. During the pandemic, we became very acutely aware of teenage depression, which is now the second most common cause of death amongst teens after accidents which are related to drugs. So it's all one thing, depression, stress, whatever. So every 40 seconds, somebody in the world is dying of suicide. So we deployed an emotional chatbot. We called it neveralone.love. And we had 6,000 suicidal ideation interventions, 25 million text messages being exchanged simultaneously. We found that the teens were actually more comfortable speaking to our emotional chatbot than to a physician or a therapist, because they weren't feeling judged. Now, of course, at the back end, we had therapists. But the fact is, no human being could do 20 million simultaneous conversations on text or intervene in 6,000 suicidal ideations. We are now upgrading that chatbot, emotional chatbot. Check it out, neveralone.love. I think what happened is we were creating global communities just through technology. And so, you know, there's a place for technology, and as I said, there's no going back. We have to learn how to use it better, that's all.
And I love that use case because you also pointed it at a very specific problem.
Very specific problem.
And I can never say the word, the anonymousness of the interaction was actually what you need even in the human interaction. You understood the human piece was that actually we can uncover more about the story when anonymous, but that's brilliant. And I think for those use cases, again, limitless. We just have to be careful that it's not a silver bullet for everything.
coming up on the end of time. We have 5 minutes and 17, 16, 15 minutes before the band comes back on. I just want to close out by asking each of you, a couple of questions looking to the future. Why should we continue to be optimistic about the outlook for healthcare delivery and the healthcare system? We see all the headlines about the challenges that we face on the delivery side as practitioners in this area, whether on the business side or on the delivery side. Why would you tell people they should continue to feel optimistic about things?
I think there's more awareness now than ever before. I think information is easily accessible. Talking about Gen Z, they're not going to doctors. They're actually going online and consulting each other, speaking to each other. We have to be aware of that. We have to be aware of the issues that are facing physicians. And, evolution is a never-ending horizon. Every generation, there's improvement. So there's always reason to be optimistic. Otherwise, what's the dream for if you can't achieve it? And we should stretch always more than we can reach.
I noticed you have an interesting event coming up on health, humanity, and the cosmos. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so September 14th and 15th at Harvard Sanders Theater, we are holding a conference called Sages and Scientists. sagesandscientists.org is where you can go to check it out. It's about the future of well-being, the future of humanity, and the future of the cosmos. We have astrobiologists now telling us that there are probably 60 billion habitable planets in just the Milky Way galaxy. 2 trillion galaxies, the universe could be teeming with life. So we have astrobiologists from the University of Arizona, from MIT, from Harvard. We have the woman who created the software for the Mars landing and even the clothes for the astronauts. And we have people who are talking about CRISPR, gene editing, messenger RNA, microbiome, all the things we're discovering today, and also the consciousness revolution. So if you're interested, sagesandscientists.org.
Dr. G, just to close out, we talked a lot about the transformations that are underway in healthcare. You've been a leader in many facets of healthcare. What advice would you have for people in the healthcare space, people who work in companies, on how to exert a leadership role, and what impact can they have on shaping this future we've talked about?
You bet. So the first thing I would say is that it is an incredibly thrilling time to be a healthcare leader. I'm personally very honored to be a healthcare leader with these two gentlemen. I mean, we are living in a post-pandemic era, ripe with innovation. The consumer is so hungry, so thirsty for anything healthcare, and we have so many gaps to fill. And healthcare will only be saved by healthcare leaders. I mean, we've seen it, right? We saw IBM Watson was going to cure cancer, Walmart left, Amazon, JP Morgan, Berkshire Hathaway, they were all going to save us. It didn't happen, guys. We're still here, right? We have to save healthcare. And whether that means being loud, weighing into the conversation on generative AI, what that regulation looks like, what policymakers need to be mindful of, how it affects the patient, or whether that means taking up the torch at your organization to say, hey, what are we doing about mis and disinformation? How are we looking at this? How are we examining it? How does it relate to value-based care? There couldn't be a more exciting time to be a healthcare leader. Partner with your clinical leaders. It's arguably the biggest missing ingredient in tech today, is that we have too many technologists but not enough clinicians. Work with your workforce, ensure that the tech is actually being done with your doctors and nurses, not to your doctors and nurses. Same for patients, that relationship goes hand in hand. Patient engagement, physician engagement is the same thing. But there was never a more exciting time to be a healthcare leader. And here's the thing, do not be afraid of failing. Because when you fail, you just get back up, dust yourself off, and do it again. And that's what we should expect in this era where everything is new. But this is the time. If not now, it'll never happen. In this post-pandemic world, with everything we've got, there was never a better time to be a healthcare leader.
Well, I hope everyone got some tips on how to have spontaneous mindfulness meditation as you're waiting for your return flights on Delta home today. I want to thank Deepak and Dr. G for a really engaging discussion here today. Thanks a lot.
All right, Dr. G left several books and gifts up front, so if you have a signed copy, thank you so much, really nice job. If you have a signed copy or you want a signed copy, look at these rows up here.
All right, all attendees that are here, there's the happy hour right after the session. It's in the lower atrium, and it's sponsored by Hasira.
Yes, make sure to play our Breakthroughs badge game to win prizes at the end of the week. We will announce winners tomorrow night.
Remember to scan your badges with the diversity suppliers and the hot topic sessions and more.
The top winners will receive an AirPod Max, sweet, a Yeti cooler, or an iPad.
And the people already outside, they're not going to win anything. I'm just telling you that right now.
Yeah, don't give them an iPad.
All right, wait. We want to take a second again to thank all of our sponsors and remind you that tomorrow morning, breakfast starting at 7 a.m., and it'll be just outside this room, and then we'll be back in here for our first session.
All right, thanks so much. Good night.
Have a great night.